Hello and thank you so much for joining me for some Saturday night crafting. I've got a fun, quick and easy technique for you tonight, and I've also got a whole bunch of variations on how you can do the same kind of technique, but hopefully with something you've got in your stash if you haven't got what I've got. So I've got about 6-ish different ways of sharing how you can do this technique. Now this is a technique where we get to have sort of two tones or even two different colors on one stamp, and we can create backgrounds or we can create embellishments with it. It's just a fun technique. It's an oldie but a goodie, and then hopefully I've got a version of it that will work with you and what you've got in your stash. So I'm starting out with a light color and a dark color of the same color family. So the first one I'm doing is a light pink and a dark pink. I'm using Catherine Pooler inks, and I've also got some Memento inks. Just use a good quality stamping ink and that will work best. I've also got some Photopolymer stamps that I'm using as well, so that is going to help with my stamping. Now the first thing I do is add a light colored ink onto my stamp. And then I go ahead and add on a dark colored ink along the edges of my stamp. And then I'm taking this blending brush to kind of blend those colors a little bit together. I'm just dabbing that blending brush onto it. And then you get this kind of two-toned look. Now this is the sort of basic version of how you get this technique done. So again, I'm going to stamp my lightest color first, and then I'm going to come in with my darker color and go around the edges. Because I'm using the same color family, I'm not worried about mixing my ink pads because I'm going from light to dark. So it's not really going to impact my ink pad. Now you can see there's quite a line there, so I'm going to take my ink blending brush and I'm just going to dab it all over. Now if you're worried about losing some of that color, you can always take your blending brush, stick it back into the light colored ink pad and add some more color on there. And there you can see that gradual, beautiful ink blend of colors. So it's a really simple technique to do and it's really effective, and you can use it with any stamp that you've got. So I'll share with you in a minute a couple sentiment stamps and how it looks when you do it with sentiments as well. So here's a very basic version of this technique. I have no idea what it's called, but I'm calling it like the edging technique. Now, if you want to do it with multiple colors, you can do that as well. So I'm going to come in with my light blue first, and then I'm taking my dark pink. Again, I'm not too worried about mixing up my ink pads because that blue is so light. And I'm going to take my blending brush and actually add ink onto my blending brush before I start blending it in. And that helps to blend those two colors together as well. So thinking about how we can blend those colors together, and if you want to use two of a more darker color or bold color, we can use our ink blending brush to add on that extra second color. So this time I'm coming in with the darker pink ink pad first, and then I'm going to come in with my dark purple ink pad, and I'm going to use the blending brush to apply that ink to the edges of the flower. So I'm going to go around the edges and just kind of stamp it on and sort of blending as I go with that color around the edge, adding a bit more onto my blending brush if I need, just to cover those edges, and then I can go ahead and stamp that down, and now we've got a two-tone look where those colors are kind of blending together. Now I could come in with my darker ink pad if my ink pad is nice and dark compared to the other ink color, and then I can blend out those colors again, and you can see you get a little bit more of a softer blend, but not too much difference. Now for the third version, we are going to kind of switch up how we're using our blending brush to get a bit more of a softer edge or a smaller edging of color. So I'm doing the same again. I'm applying the lighter color first, then coming in with the darker color straight onto the stamp. And then I'm going to take my blending brush. I'm going to ink it up with the lighter color again. So I've got plenty of that color on there. And then we're going to do more of a flicking motion. So we are going to flick towards the outside. So we're kind of flicking that color away. And it might be handy to have a kind of rag next to you or a scrap bit of paper towel or something, just so you can dust off some of that darker color so you're not putting it towards the center of the flower. This just gives us another version where we get a more softer middle bit and a darker edge bit, but a lot less of that kind of dark color towards the middle. So here you can see a lot more light in the middle, and just sort of the edges are colored in a darker color, but there's no harsh blending line where those colors meet. So again, I'm going to come in with my purple, my light purple, and then I'll have my dark purple and do the edges of my stamp. So I'm just inking up the very edge of the stamp again. And then I'm going to use that sort of flicking method with my brush, my blending brush, and just kind of flick that color out towards the edge. And then we get this gorgeous little stamped image again with two different tones of the same color. So I love this technique and how it looks. I've got another 2-3 versions to share with you. So here are all the ones that we've done so far using the ink blending brush. Now we can do the same thing again with a stamp. With a sentiment stamp. Now I found with this it was a bit more difficult to get a nice crisp clear look, and I've also switched out my ink pads. They're not as juicy as the Catherine Pooler ones, So when I stamp this one down, it's kind of a bit choppy looking. So for the fourth version that we're going to do, we're going to bring in a stamp platform. And this allows us to get a lot more color down, to get a lot more solid of an image, and to control our ink blending a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and ink up like I did before, but this time I'm going to stamp it down 2 or 3 times to get a really good solid chunk of color. And I don't have to worry about that darker ink yet, because I can go ahead and add that on my second layer. Because I'm using a stamp platform, I know it's going to stamp exactly where it was before. So this gives me a bit more control and I can add a lot more color. So I'm going to stamp this one twice with the darker purple just to really saturate those edges and give it that gorgeous sort of two-toned look. So I love using the stamp platform because it does give you a lot more crisp of an image. So there you can see the 2 different versions. But again, if you only have a stamp block, then it absolutely will work. So here I'm going to do the two-tone look. I stamped it a couple times first, and then I'm going to go ahead and add on my ink. And here you can see where you see those edges. And if we do that flicking method again, and this time we can just wipe off in between and we don't have to worry about making sure that that middle color is still staying saturated because we've already stamped that first color. And this is a dark blue and the dark purple, and you get that gorgeous kind of edging look to it. So super fun. Really love using the stamp platform just because I can stamp a few more times. Here it is again with the Christmas stamp set, light purple on the middle, dark purple on the outside. Just a fun way to look at it. Now for number 5, it's not quite a full number 5 because for this one, we're just going to take a different type of ink blending brush. So I've got these really, really mini skinny ones, and these are just makeup brushes off of AliExpress, I believe. They're really tiny, and all we're going to do is ink up with our darker color and ink around the edges. So I've already pre-stamped the light color, and now I'm going to come in and just have a lot more control because I'm using a much smaller brush, and I'm just going to add on the color around the edges and stamp it down. Number 6 is if you don't have ink blending brushes. So fret not. If you do not have any brushes, you can still do this technique. I'm going to ink up my color. I've already inked up all of the base, and then this time I'm going to come in with the darker color and ink up the entire stamp. So I've inked up the first color, stamped that all down, and now I'm adding on the second one. And rather than doing the edges, I'm going to remove some of the color. So I've inked up that whole stamp with my dark pink, and now I'm just going to take out a bunch of that dark color from the center, and then I can go ahead and stamp it down. This works really well if you've got really small stamps as well, and you can do it as many times as you need if you're using a stamp platform. So it works just as good as like an ink blending brush, but obviously if you haven't got an ink blending brush, then you can use a Q-tip or a cotton swab, whatever they're called in your country. Now moving on to creating some cards and finishing off the cards, I wanted to fill in some of this white space, but obviously I don't want to have to do any flicking. I didn't want to cover up any of my images. So I took an acrylic paint pen and just added a whole bunch of dots in the background, and that kind of killed some of that white space. And then I made myself a nice matting layer using my InkPad and stuck them all together onto a card base. I'll finish this one off in just a second, but I wanted to share one of my latest little hauls. I treated myself to some new stamps and some dies and things from scrapbookdotcom. I felt like since I hit my 50,000 subscriber count, I should give myself a little treat. So I actually bought a new filming camera, which cost an arm and a leg. I'll share that with you very soon. And then I got some new fun things from scrapbook.com. And I'm really excited about all these new products. You'll see some of these in just a second when I put these cards together. I couldn't help myself. I wanted to use them straight away. So these are my fun little haul items that I thought I'd toss into my video so you can see what I've been up to shopping wise and what kind of piqued my interest lately. Now, I'm thrilled about this bit. I finally got another roll of this tape. So as you've seen in my videos before, I've got the 6-inch one, which is quite massive. It's really huge. And I decided to go for the 2-inch one, and I really want to get the 4-inch one next. Now back to finishing off some cards. This one here, I took my black soot ink and I kind of splattered some splats all over the background. And then I grabbed my gray alcohol pen. This is an Arteza one from ages ago. And we're just going to add a little bit more dimension to this card simply by tracing around all the flowers. It just kind of makes it look like it's got a bit of a shadow on it, that it's kind of popping off the card a bit more. You'll see what I mean in a second when I compare it to one that hasn't been done once I finish this one. So here it is all finished. I love the dimension that it gives. It kind of looks like it pops off the card. So obviously the one on the right hasn't had any background added or the gray edging around the flowers. So I feel like the one on the left just stands out a lot more. Now moving on to some finished cards, I use this Lisa Horton script embossing folder and some of her gold wax. It's the iced white gold wax. And then I also made myself a little panel using the Catherine Pooler ink color that I used for my sentiment to make that little panel for the background. And then I ran that through my die cutting machine to emboss it and die cut it, and then use that gold wax just on the top raised bits of the embossing folder so that they kind of shine and glimmer a little bit more. For my next card, I added some strips along the left-hand side of my black card panel, and then I popped up that sentiment onto some glitter cardstock with some foam tape underneath the glitter card to finish off this one. And then for the next one, I used birthday wishes from this Gina K set and just did the birthday, as the dies are separate, so you have birthday and then wishes. So I cut out the birthday and I used the happy die from the Waffle flowers, which was from my little crafty stash haul, and I did that on some pink gold, I should say pink foil card, and I popped that straight onto the card with no foam at all. And then for the next card, I used the happy and the birthday dies from Waffle Flowers from my little haul. And then I also used this die set here that I got from scrapbookdotcom, and I created this card. So this is the one where I added that gray outline to all the flowers, and I love this one the most, I think. I did some faux stitching just with a black pen around the edge of the card to add a little bit more to that white background. But that's all the cards I finished off today, and I only have one little panel left, which I'm not sure I'm going to use because I'm not sure I love it or not. I thought I would try and cut up that sample bit we did together at the very start where I was just making a whole bunch of flowers, just showing you the different ways you could do it. But I don't think I really care for it that much, so I'll probably just tuck it in the little pile of things that I'll take to school for the kids to use at school. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I can't wait to see you next week. Bye!